Hi guys, we're back. We're gonna be talking about how to use soeing PCR in order to make a library. So I had just finished talking a little bit about how we could use the soeing PCR in order to mutate a base pair from X to Z, I think were our choice letters that we chose. But we can also use degenerate codons. And that's really useful for if we want to make a library of something. So for this example, we'll be talking about how we can maybe mutate the active site of some protein. So we're going to first start off with our open reading frame. We'll just say that this is some enzyme, and through magic, we know that this zone right here, oops, bad angle there, this zone is the active site. And we want to change whatever base pairs are here into a series of ends. So how do we do that? We want to go from, the normal thing to, we'll just say 3 ends. And this, as a disclaimer, this drawing is not to scale. 4 ends we'll go with. So if you can already see this, thumbs up, but it's a little bit, complex, and we can just talk about how or why soeing is such a great tool to do this. So let's back up a little bit, and we're going to start from here. And we're going to say this is where we're starting from, and we're going to get to that end position. So all we really got to do, first of all, is we know that we need our end oligos. So we're going to have a forward primer, and we're going to have a reverse primer. No problem there. This is just, the first 20 base pairs of that sequence, and then the last 20 base pairs reverse complemented of that sequence. And then we want to mutate this zone. Well, in order to do that, we need to design oligos that will allow us to break this chunk into 2 parts. So we're going to need a forward primer that is going to give us, this 3' side. So I'll draw what the product of these 2 primers is. So we're going to get and we need, or I guess I should I'll annotate this before I move on. So that forward primer is going to give us our little green area. Oops, again, I'm just bad with scale today. I'm going to step back even further. So that forward primer is going to give us our right-hand chunk. And let's get that all annotated up. So we're going to have, let's just talk about this real quick. I'm trying to decide on a color pink. So we have this forward primer. The combination of this forward primer here, which we'll call 2, whoops, didn't come out that well, 2F and 2R, are going to give us this chunk. And this chunk is going to have about 20 base pairs upstream of the area that we want to mutate, and 20 base pairs downstream of the area that we want to mutate, and we get this area that we're going to mutate. And we're going to come back to this in a second. But for the first half, the first chunk, we're going to need a reverse primer. And the combination of, we'll call this reverse primer 1R. And our forward primer 1F. So the combination of these primers is going to give us another chunk of DNA. And we'll annotate this as well. So we get a little bit about 20 base pairs upstream. So this is about 20 base pairs for all the way up here. And we get about 20 base pairs downstream from that oligo. That's another 20. And then we have this region in here that we want to mutate. So you can see that we have all of the original gene is encoded by this DNA, and our oligos are going to be binding either 20 base pairs upstream and downstream for both of these oligos. So the secret is that this center area right here that I'm pointing at is kind of our canvas for adding mutations. So we have our homology right here. So this oligo has homology to that template there. So this is going to extend that way in order to give us this. And it's going to bring along whatever is behind it, this whole chunk right here, for the ride. I should probably use a different color. It's just going to bring along its caboose for the ride, so the back part of it, the 5' part of it. It's coming along no matter what. And let's break down that back part. The back part has another 20 base pairs of homology, and it has this center part. And the center part is where we're going to be adding, ends. So we'll just put a bunch of ends there. So 4 ends. And the same thing is going on here in this other reverse oligo, is we're getting a bunch of homology to our template right here. And it's just bringing along everything else for the ride. So it's bringing along our ends and our 20 base pairs of homology. So that now we can kind of start to look at this thing in a different light. So we get N, 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 and then we have N. So this is 4 N's. Oh, that's a backwards N. And then we can begin the actual sewing reaction. So again, in the sewing reaction, it's important to pay attention to our 5' and 3', and I'm realizing now I've done this kind of backwards with respect to how I was doing the other ones. So in this case, we're going to be paying attention to the middle strands. And we're going to redraw these so that during the denaturing step, this DNA strand right here, it's 5' and 3', is going to melt, and then our other strand up here also going to melt. We have our 3' and our 5'. So now we start to see why we had that other region of homology. So on this chunk, right, on this piece of DNA, our oligo bound to this region in order to generate this chunk. And in our other fragment of DNA, this, let me move up a little bit. In this fragment, this oligo, or rather this oligo, was binding at this region in order to generate these fragments. But now we're going to be using that other overlap area. So we had this other overlap that we just put there for some reason, and this is what's going to allow us to sew together our stuff. So we're going to be using that one and that one, the very 5' extremes. So we don't have any homology here. These ends are just dead space. Nothing is going to help us out here. And as we all know, DNA extends from the 5' to the 3'. So let me just switch colors. Let's get a nice, how about a brown? We'll see how that comes out. So DNA extends from the 5' to the 3'. So off of here, we're going to get this extending. And off of our bottom strand, this is going to extend in that direction.